We're here outside of Wiley's Cafe and Jazz Club, which is a mainstay in Boston's South End community and in the jazz community as a whole. Jazz is having a real moment again, and not just the kind of uncle who wears too many hats moment. Nonprofits, foundations, and museums are showing real love. They're treating jazz like the prodigal child returning home, and they're throwing a whole party complete with lighting design and a step and repeat. And that's beautiful to see because jazz was born from Black Americans in New Orleans and later Harlem, playing in the only places they could. Not just because the acoustics were great, but because discrimination kept them out of venues that today are proudly celebrating the art form. That's growth. That's America doing the emotional work. But we can't forget the journey. Jazz started in smoky back rooms, at rent parties, and in speakeasies so underground they probably had their own subway line. Then back then, the music was called everything from the devil's noise to unsavory jungle music. But today, those same rhythms are being archived, studied, and celebrated like they're rare Pokemon cards. And it fits a pattern. America loves to celebrate Black contributions on a delay. We innovate, create, and transform the culture, and they wait 50 years to call it genius. It can take decades for the flowers, the awards, and most importantly, the money to show up. And by that time, a lot of the pioneers are long gone. And don't get me started on those posthumous honors. America loves to ignore you while you're here and then put your face on a stamp when you're gone. But despite all that, jazz survived. It evolved. It refused to stay in the polite little box that people tried to put it in. And beyond the concert halls, college recitals, and traditional clubs we know and love, it's bubbling up in the places we least expect. Somebody's basement, a warehouse in Detroit, a backyard in Roxbury, a TikTok live where a teenager is riffing trumpet sets between homework assignments. Because jazz has always been about making a little something out of nothing. You know, what we do best: improvisation, innovation, Black genius refusing to be quiet. So today we're asking what it means to make jazz now. Not just the kind that gets written into grant proposals or performed on big stages, although those are places where we love to see it, but the jazz that's happening in real communities and created by real people. We know the problem, now let's get to the root of it. I'm Paris Austin, and this is Rooted. So who's listening to jazz these days, and where are they finding it? We hit the streets to ask you.
I love jazz music. I've been listening to it and playing it my entire life.
Why? What do you love about it?
Well, I mean, it kind of ties to my connection with it, you know? Like, me and my dad bond over it a lot. So I always have a very positive association with it.
Well, the thing I love about jazz in general, it's basically like a conversation without any words. So like you can hear this in any jazz record. You know, the piano will say something and trumpet will answer something back and the bass will answer something back. It's not really so planned throughout. It's just like music having a conversation with music.
As far as like it just being very compassionate, it really just can make you focus a lot on a lot of things in your life, you know? So I just feel like jazz is the way to go.
It actually brings love to me because, you know, like other music, it's all about like war, gangs and all shootings and all that stuff. And it's just, this stuff here is just like, it's pretty much your family can listen to it, your kids can listen to it without any problems.
Where, if anywhere, do you think jazz is alive today? I mean, like in a physical space.
Yeah.
I feel like jazz, in my experience, is really prominent here in this Boston area. This is the most that I've heard about jazz, the most I've seen people enjoying jazz, playing jazz, and learning about jazz.
I mean, around here, actually, there are some, I guess, jazz clubs in Cambridge. I think they still have this.
But I know somebody told me about one that I've been meaning to check out.
Is it Wally's? Does that sound familiar?
Wally's.
Honestly, it's like older generation places, so like maybe down a certain street in a neighborhood where like most of the people who are there have lived there for a while. You would like every once in a while listen to jazz music playing from their homes.
Well, in places like New Orleans in the streets, you will find jazz everywhere in the streets. And in places like Boston and New York, clubs, festivals, like, for example, famously the Blue Note in New York.
One place where you can be in conversation with jazz is GBH Music's Jazz Now concert series, which takes place right here in the Fraser Performance Studio. We recently sat down with Grammy-nominated saxophonist and composer Godwin Louis at one of the shows to get his thoughts on the art form today and see him in action. Godwin Louis, it is such a pleasure to have you here this evening. Thank you so much for sitting down to chat.
Thank you. Thank you, Paris. Thank you for having me. Thank you to GBH.
Yes, and so of course this series is called Jazz Now, which implies that it's urgent, it's breathing, living, alive. What does that mean to you?
Jazz Now. I think jazz music, as I like to refer to it, America's premier art form, have always been, I guess, present. So I like the title Jazz Now because throughout our history, especially in the 20th and 21st century, jazz seems to always find its presence. So jazz now, meaning today, this is what it is. So I think that's what it means to me.
Some people might think that jazz is of the past because it is such a historic art form. But how do you like to remind people of the present day innovation that's happening in the art form?
Right, jazz again is all around us. When we look at artists, up and coming artists like Loive, I hope I'm pronouncing their name right, incredible work on the TikTok platforms. People like Samar Joy, they're still very popular.
The Grammy award-winning
Exactly.
Samar Joy.
People like John Baptiste from New Orleans, still winning, but he managed to find that kind of the essence of jazz throughout his Americana phases, blues, whether he's exploring whatever genre, it's always jazz, and it's now. So I would say that jazz is very present.
And you were telling me that you kind of split your time between Harlem and Boston, around the world, of course.
Right.
But we know Harlem as the birthplace of jazz music. Boston has its own jazz lineage as well, but how do you think the two places compare?
Harlem and Boston. Wow. The two places are absolutely different, to be honest.
And specifically
musically,
in terms of music, yes.
but each have, rich music history. For example, I can think of one maestro that I got the chance to study with when I was a student at Berkeley, who was one of the pioneers of the jazz scene here. I'm talking about none other than the great late Herb Pomeroy. Was a trumpet player. Got to play with Charlie Parker, people like that. You mentioned Harlem. Of course, people are aware of the Harlem Renaissance and its contribution to music in general. We must also acknowledge New Orleans as the birthplace because that's very important.
100%.
We don't want people come after us. So New Orleans.
Especially not nobody from New Orleans.
Exactly. So absolutely New Orleans and Harlem. But I would say each one of the scenes have, the intersection because musically, we always playing homage to the pioneers of the music. So that's a great thing about this music. Whether it's, in Boston, Harlem, or New Orleans, you always find that mutual understanding and mutual connection, for the betterment of the art form in general.
Whether it's connecting that music from the Northeast to the Bayou, so to speak, or to audiences around the world, how do you connect the African diaspora through jazz?
To me, that's very important because the history of jazz itself, I've spent the last, I would say, 16 years now. For me, it started when I got the chance to live in New Orleans to attend the prestigious Thelonious Monk Institute, formerly known as the Thelonious Monk Institute. Now it's the Hancock Institute, so shout out to the great Herbie Hancock. So I got the chance to live there between 2009 and 2011. And in addition to that, when I was young, between the ages of 8 till 10, 11, I got the chance to live in Haiti. And to me, that's when I realized that, cultures are connected. And then I started learning the history of New Orleans, tracing some of that connection through Congo Square, that a lot of Creole, what we call free people of color, They call affranchis, the French term. Got to move to New Orleans, settle in the Treme neighborhoods and throughout New Orleans, and then forming this unique culture. So then you have, first of all, in New Orleans, a lot of times they like to refer to New Orleans as the northernmost part of the
Yes,
Caribbean because of
yes.
its Spanish and French influence. A lot of people are not aware of the Spanish influence. So then that Caribbean culture, in terms of rhythmically, because we know historically the drums were not allowed in the United States, met with the blues, that bayou, that delta blues, forming this unique art form that we know from the tresillo, to the bomba, to oh, when I say da 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 da, the blues met with this rhythm. So for me, in my music personally, and in my musical philosophy, I've always believed in the connection of the diaspora. Furthermore, not just that, but I think it goes beyond that because when we talk about the American continent, we talk about three leading cultures that come together, whether we accept it socially or not, to form this unique experience, which is the European influence, the African influence, and the native influence. So for me, I'm always, personally, you didn't ask for that, but I'm adding
But
it.
I
that
love it though.
So I always consider myself a representative of that, the continental American sound. And in my project Global, that's what we talk about because it's all throughout. And the art form, again, I think that it's very important for people to understand that, and especially people from the African diaspora to understand that, okay, there's a major connection from the Caribbean to New Orleans to Port-au-Prince to Salvador de Bahia in Brazil to parts of Afro-Colombia, to Esmeralda, Ecuador. That connection is very important culturally and musically. Yeah.
What do you hear from people when you bring your sound to those places?
What do I hear from people? Some people have referred to it as gospel music. Depends on where I am. Sometimes people be like, "Oh, it's Haitian music," because of my Haitian background and lineage. Sometimes people will refer to it as African music, depending on what we're playing. But it's always a fusion kind of title. So, like, oh yeah, that's that fusion kind of thing.
Yeah, like some good gumbo or something.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I respect, I guess, that whatever people think it is, I
100%.
accept it.
100%. Now, you mentioned you're global, and obviously you've traveled all around the world with your music, and you've been to some places where the resistance foundation that jazz was built on, that energy of resistance isn't guaranteed all over the world. I'm thinking about places like Russia or China. How is jazz received there, especially when you think about that revolutionary aspect of it?
What's very interesting is I was just thinking about this exactly 10 years ago. I got to do, I want to say, a 40-city tour of Russia. So whenever I look at the Russian map, I'm always like, oh, into this part, that part, all the way
It
down
is
to
a
Siberia.
real big
And
country.
I will say that every single show was sold out. And I
Wow.
remember it was during the election of our current president, President Trump. So it was a very interesting climate to see the climate in the U.S. I remember that day I was in St. Petersburg, and the next day everyone wanted to interview me looking for maybe some clickbaits, whatever, but I think I beat them in that. So all to say that in my travelings to China, people always love this music, jazz. It's kind of like classical music, and you always see the genre being practiced by musicians. I've met a lot of incredible Russian musicians that never traveled outside of Russia or never traveled to the U.S. and I was shocked by their knowledge and understanding socially, musically of the blues. I don't think I've experienced that anywhere outside of Russia. Maybe, I guess, of course, you have this in like places like Israel and Japan. That connection is there. There's something about the blues that I think that they understand, and that's why sometimes you find some of the highest level of jazz quote practitioners from those places. So that was my experience in China and Russia. Music is very jazz music, particularly, is very much alive. Yeah.
And maybe it's a bit of a quiet resistance that they're able to channel in some ways.
It didn't seem like that. I think they're looking at it more from like, wow, this is very unique, the improvisational aspect. I don't think they're looking at it socially. In China as well, I'm sure you understand why. It's not
Yes.
very, it comes with consequences. It's like, okay, the next title of this tune is entitled "Kick Them Out."
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't do that
I
in
see.
Russia. It's more like we're gonna pay homage to Charlie Parker, a great Black American hero that we love, and so yes.
Yeah.
In terms of resistance, I didn't quite see that in the arts because in both places it's kind of set up, culturally from inception that the arts doesn't do that.
Mhm.
The art, it's yeah.
Do you think we could learn from that a little bit here in the US? I mean, we're always
No.
making things political, but
Absolutely not, because the history is different. The jazz and the inception of the genre itself come from
yeah.
Hambone, people working and saying, "Wade in the water, God's gonna." That's people arriving to the U.S. You have things like that, or sometimes I feel like a motherless child. The history of the music is different, and in addition, the way we practice the music is different, and this is something we always deal with when we present master classes overseas, because we'll hear someone like, "Hey, you sound great, but what this music is not about is that idea of what you think is perfection. There's some kind of like social call, a different philosophy, a different psychology that comes with this music. The idea of forward motion and yada, yada, yada. So this is all to say, no, we can't. And I'm not speaking about in terms of like, it doesn't always have to be political, but to me, it's beyond just kind of like, as we were mentioning, in Russia, it's like perfect time, perfect cadence. I don't think Americans would even buy that, expect that from any of their practitioners, from the most popular music to, the most sophisticated music. We're kind of expect. I think we look at music a little more socially, whether we
Yeah.
talk about Kurt Cobain to Mariah Carey to Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. To
Something
Kendrick
that-
Lamar, right? To
Exactly.
Bad Bunny,
Yeah,
right?
exactly,
The
yeah.
list goes on.
Mhm.
And to that point, I mean, we know that the foundations of hip hop, for instance, are in jazz.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're a big connoisseur of hip hop music.
All music.
Raw music,
Yes, you
excellent.
can try me. Yes.
Where do you look for jazz in other music? Do you look for it in other music?
No, not necessarily. I think the way we tell the stories kind of vary, and the audience vary as well. And so I do believe that the lineage is the same. This is why the great maestro Nicholas Payton started referring to this music as kind of like Black American music, and not from a divisive order, but more from. I understand that a lot of people don't. They think, oh, here we go, dividing America again. But I think it's simply looking at it from like historically. If you look at it from this point, check it out. When we talk about soul music, jazz, R&B, hip hop, they're to me the same. They're just the Black American experience. It's not taken away from anybody else's experience. And I think this is why sometimes so-called jazz lack an audience, because people don't acknowledge this connection. A lot of the listeners of jazz today come from that soul generation. They might have seen Stevie Wonder, and then today they're like, well, jazz seemed like I can relax and listen to it. They have the ear and the wisdom for it, for the Ella Fitzgerald. You understand what I'm saying? So later on, this generation today, our generation, in 70 years, are going to go back to Louis Armstrong, because the business is set up like that, the social order in terms of, hey, let's go to a jazz festival with our grandkids. Like, oh, this music is kind of cool. So this is all to say, to me, they're all connected. So I don't look for one here and there. I just sometimes I'm soloing and I can think of Mozart, Bach, or Kendrick Lamar, or I don't know, anybody.
Yeah, and even like you think about rap artists today, that music they sample it over and over. Like
Absolutely, yeah.
from the
Culturally,
Isley
yeah.
Brothers
Hmm.
to Kendrick Lamar
Hmm.
with I, and to
He's a
from
jazz
Nina
musician.
Simone to Jay-Z. Yeah,
Hmm.
100%.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
coming, and he's that example of what I'm talking about. He's been working with amazing colleagues like the great maestro Kamasi Washington, who's considered a jazz
Mhm.
musician, great producer maestro Terrace Martin. They're all amazing practitioners of this music, jazz, yeah, and they get to bring that creative element of improvisation to the music. So to call it something, you see what I'm saying? This is where
Yeah.
the genres get a little twisted to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you have the unique pleasure and privilege of nurturing the next generation of
Mhm.
musicians through your work at
Absolutely,
Berkeley, where you
yes.
also went to school. Um,
Yes.
what are your students learning today? What is the wisdom and the knowledge you're imparting on them?
So today with my students, I think now that I'm on my 5th year. I think they've understood the task that, yeah, when we go see Godwin, we're not just learning about New Orleans. We're understanding the role of each culture. Berkeley's such, an international institution in terms of like the presence of the student body. So for me, I'm always trying to get the students to understand where they're from and understanding historically the music they're practicing and their contribution to the music, which is very important. So studying with me mean, translating this culture and one's unique life experience to the music. I feel like as a student, that was always what was passed down to me. It was like your experience, your meaning, your. So it's a lot of kind of empowering the students with the overall knowledge. The world is smaller, so we can't only study bebop and swing. Maybe you're from Indonesia, you need to understand that music. Maybe you're from Morocco, you have to understand Rai music, and maybe you are from South Korea, tapping into K-pop or whatever the traditional culture is, and you can kind of like fuse it with the American aesthetic.
Are there things that weren't part of your education at Berkeley that you're making sure are part of their education?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
all those things that I mentioned. When I was at Berkeley, shout out to Berkeley, great institution. I think it's solely from my experience. So students are learning from my experience. I've always been interested in the world and people, connecting people, trying to find a common denominator, union, these kind of things. So as a practitioner of this music, I try to bring that same idea to the students that the older, the more times go on, the more the world is smaller today, you know, social media, all of it. So that's why I'm a big fan of a unifier of some sort, but I want to see everyone equally represented in the arts.
Yeah.
So that's the goal.
What are the advantages that social media offers, but also the challenges it presents to allowing jazz to live on for decades to come?
In terms of challenge, I'm not sure. Perhaps the divide between the live audience, people that actually go and check out the music, and I guess ways for musicians to acquire income maybe could be a division, because a lot of the people that come to a lot of these concerts perhaps are not heavy on social media. I always get this. For instance, I just got back from the jazz cruise, and a lot of the audience members, they'll say, "Where can you? How come you didn't bring a CD?" I said, "Oh, it's online." "Oh, we buy CDs," and I was getting that every night.
What? People still buying CDs?
Oh, interesting. So maybe that's the divide. But however, as musicians, we're told if you need social media, people will come out, and of course, the young generation can relate to it as well. So perhaps that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lastly, Godwin, when someone is listening to your music 50 years from now, what do you want them to remember about you?
I want them to remember that Godwin was an American that try to define what America as a continent is, which is America is African, European, and Native. The histories there's up and down, but at the end of the day, the DNA of a lot of us have that. So musically, it's a gumbo. We find it in our cuisine, all, whether you're in America, whether you're in Mexico or Brazil, you find something that's like influenced by all three culture.
It's in the gumbo, the
However,
jollof, the moqueca, all of it.
exactly, you find it all. So
Arroz con
I think
pollo.
that's what I want people to remember, that I try to, I guess, remind people what this young continent is. We're not France, we're not the UK. We have our own unique history, and we should celebrate it because people love that idea. And furthermore, if I may, I think we introduce people, now peep the way I say this, to the cool side of freedom.
Okay. It doesn't always have to be struggle.
Yes, exactly. To the cool side of, hey, I want to be this kind of artist.
Yeah.
Go ahead, be that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Godwin.
Thank you.
Excited to see the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And since we're talking about jazz, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention GBH's own jazz radio programming. From the late, great dean of Boston Jazz Radio, Eric Jackson, to GBH's current jazz host, Al Davis, so many folks have helped keep jazz alive and well on our airwaves. So the next time someone asks you, where is jazz happening today? Let them know it's all around us. Be sure to stay tuned to our YouTube channel, Instagram page, and TikTok, as well as Spotify, and keep up with us via email. Until next time, stay rooted, stay rhythmic, and stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in to Rooted. You can click the QR code to keep up with us everywhere you stream or scroll.